It is a privilege to be here, and thank you very much for your attendance. All the more reason why our next guest is so important, laughter. Laughter with a purpose. You know, I always like to say, I don't care what we're talking about, but I always like to keep the tail wagging here. Mirth with a message, humor that heals, keynotes that enlighten, educate, and entertain, all from a speaker who is not only funny, as you'll soon find out, but also who is a neurohumorist. I'd never heard that term until today, neurohumorist. One who researches the neurobiology of humor and then translate these cutting-edge findings for the layperson, that would be you and me, showing how they can apply humor to heal and empower themselves. I love that, and I'm sure you will too. Audiences love Karyn Buxman's message of laughter and leadership. You know, in 1 month, I was just reading here, she spoke for the $1 Million Roundtable, the United States Air Force, the Mayo Clinic, Pfizer and Associates, for operative room nurses. Karyn is obviously in the National Speakers Bureau, and she is in the Hall of Fame on top of being with the National Speakers Bureau. We are fortunate to have her here. Of course, she's a proud recipient of the Lifetime Achievement Award from the Association for Applied Therapeutic Humor. She serves on the advisory boards of the Invisible Disabilities Association and the American Happiness Association. She's the co-founder of the World Laughter Tour, and that is why Karyn Buxman is the best person to teach your team how they can lead with laughter. And with all that said, and by the way, she's the author of numerous books and articles too. Are we surprised? What better expert on humor and brain health? Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Karyn Buxman.
Woo! Where's Wayne? So, what time do you want me to stop? How? 5 after? Where are you? Oh, cool. All right. In the spirit of research, I haven't done this very often with groups, so you, being this is like a scientific group, and so I'm going to ask you to do something very simple. I'm going to have you draw. Let's do 5 lines on just a sheet of paper. And, all right, the first one, we'll just put a little heart by it. That's the 1 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 10, 1 to 10. All right, I want to get a baseline here before we get started. So I want you to get an approximate count of your pulse. Do you know how to take your pulse? If not, it's like slow, medium, fast. But if you know how to count your pulse for 6 seconds, Heidi, can you give us 6 seconds? And then we'll just put a 10 after it. Okay, on your mark, get set. Ready? Go. Okay, and then just plot that somewhere between 60 and 120. And then on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your mood? With 1 being, ooh, oh so sad, and 10 being really, really happy, like ecstatic. Given that you just had lunch, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your level of alertness? Are you kind of sleepy? Kind of tired? You feeling moderately awake, or you're just like, woohoo! Let's see. Next one, let's do respiratory. Just, about how many breaths you're taking in a minute. Heidi, give us another 6 seconds. All right. Oh, thank you. That's so much more important. Another 6 seconds, I just want you to count how many breaths you have between when she says start and stop. Okay, 6. So put a 0 after that. And then last but not least, let's put on a scale of 1 to 10 your comfort level. With 1, you're experiencing quite a bit of pain. And the other, you are just totally pain-free. And I want you to just kind of put that aside. And we'll come back to that. Yay! I'm so excited to talk about this. And this is something that I'm so passionate about, and I'm just so appreciative that Wayne asked me to be part of this, and I'm just so excited that Wayne is so forward-thinking about this whole concept of brain and how it can help people, especially those with invisible disabilities, with chronic illness, but anybody can improve their well-being through the brain. Now, that being said, my background is in humor. I studied it in graduate school, convinced my advisors to let me be able to look at this, and it's very true what E.B. White said, that humor can be dissected as a frog can, but the thing dies in the process, and the innards are totally discouraging to any but the purely scientific mind. And that's because humor is, we know it when we see it. It's like, oh yeah, that was funny, or that made me feel good, or that made me laugh. But in terms of being able to measure it, that gets a little trickier. And there's a couple of different reasons for that. Actually, numerous reasons for that. When we're talking about, we're just zipping right there. I got to put this down before I get myself into trouble. I'll just go here. I'm a neurohumorist. I know what you're thinking. Oh, God, another neurohumorist. But when we're talking about humor, there are several components. We could be talking about the cognitive component, the part that engages the prefrontal cortex, the part that involves the prefrontal lobe, and that this is the intellectual process, and that's what we refer to as wit. And then there is the emotional process. How does humor make us feel? And that is mirth. And then there is the physiological expression of humor, and that is laughter. Now, how many of you have ever experienced something intellectually and it was funny, but you didn't laugh out loud? Because you can certainly have wit without laughter. You can have wit and you can have the emotional feeling, but you might not have laughter. You can also have laughter and not necessarily have anything that caused it. Maybe you just were laughing at a response because you heard somebody else laughing. It was contagious, or maybe you were practicing laughter for no reason. And so we can have these things individually, but in total, this is what I'm going to be referring to today as humor. Groucho Marx said, humor is reason gone mad. Elaine Pasquale, who was a researcher, said, humor is whatever people find funny. Now, there's much more expansive kinds of definitions, and they go into a lot more detail, but for our purposes today, this will be enough. And so let's just leave that as it is there. So, when I was doing my research in graduate school, one of my mentors was a PhD, a nurse researcher, Vera Robinson. And she came up with 5 purposes for humor. And initially these were for healthcare, but I have found that these could be generalized, I think, for any situation. And I want to give these to you so that you can be thinking about these as we come back later with some more examples. One was to establish relationships. Another was to relieve anxiety and decrease stress, to release anger in a socially acceptable way, to avoid or deny painful feelings, and to facilitate learning. And then she went a little deeper, and we went into the functions and effects of humor. And that is the psychological, social, communication, and physiological. And so I want to go into each of these in a little bit of detail because this will help you gain some understanding as to how humor can be of help, in particular with those suffering from any kind of chronic illness, invisible disability, or whatever the case may be, even if you are in a state of wellness. So psychologically, humor is recognized as a healthy coping mechanism. How many of you have ever been stressed out and found a way to deal with your stress in an unhealthy manner? Anybody here love chocolate? You love eating. And then for some people, it might be smoking, it might be eating, it might be drugs, it might be retail therapy. There's a variety of different ways that we can deal with our stress, but humor is a positive psychological coping mechanism. Socially, it is a lubricant. It bonds people. It establishes relationships. It builds relationships. It builds rapport. And when we are thinking about persons who are suffering from an illness or an invisible disability, many times one of the factors that they're dealing with is isolation. And how can we use humor to help build those relationships and rapport, to help decrease that isolation? Third is communication. It's a great way to enhance communication, whether you're trying to impart information, as one of the purposes was, whether you're trying to convey anger, whether you're trying to convey frustration. A lot of times people will do this through the guise of humor because it's safe. Someone who is not comfortable, who doesn't feel safe, we're going back to the brain and safety. If you want a safe way to give someone a message, you can give it in the guise of humor. Because if that person responds the way you hope that they would respond, now you get a satisfactory response, you have a great engagement. But if they don't respond the way you hope that they would respond, the person still has a safety net, because now they can say, oh, that's okay, I was only joking, I was just kidding, and it gives them the ability to save face. I remember once, this is more of a healthcare professional example, but I was taking care of a gentleman when I was doing hands-on nursing, and he had cancer, and the surgery was going to necessitate the removal of his testicles. And so going in before the surgery, I went in and I asked him, as nurses are trained to do, can you explain the surgery to me as you understand it? And he looked at me and he slapped his leg and he goes, yep, sounds like the doc's gonna change me from a rooster to a hen. And that was really funny, and I laughed, but there was something that was just in the back of my head that said, sounds like there might be an issue here, because that was not normally the way he interacted with people. And so I busied myself about the room and just continued to chat with him. And within less than 30 seconds, he was asking me questions about his sexuality after the surgery. So it was his way of staying safe and communicating at the same time. So lots of different ways that humor comes into communication, and in terms of business, when I do business talks and leadership talks, we also talk about the importance of humor in negotiation and dealing with difficult people. And then most importantly, what I want to cover in the time that we're here together is the physiological effects, because there are so many wonderful, wonderful, positive physiological effects. Humor is designed wonderfully for acute stress. It's very good for dealing with the adrenaline and in dealing with that short-term response. But what I'm hoping to help inspire you to do is not only use humor for the short term, but to start building it like a muscle so that you can increase your bandwidth, so that you can be more resilient. And this isn't the only tool that you need in your toolbox to build resilience, but oh my goodness, I tell audiences, I said, what if I could give you a tool that didn't require you to break a sweat, didn't require you to break a bank, you don't have to be coordinated, you don't have to spend a lot of money, you don't have to have any special skills. Would you be interested? And so much of what we want people to do and be compliant with, we say, well, we want you to eat a very special restricted diet. We want you to do these kinds of exercises, and I know it's going to be uncomfortable, and you're going to sweat a lot, and you're going to feel miserable, but it's going to be so good for you. And hopefully they will do that. But here is something that I would think that the compliance would be so much higher because it is fun. Now, that being said, that's almost counterproductive to this, because I don't know about you, but my mom, when I was growing up, my mom said, if it feels good, it's either illegal, immoral, or fattening. And there is this feeling that, well, if it feels good and it's easy and it's fun, then it can't really be that good for you. And I am here to tell you that humor is power. And the power comes in the intentional, purposeful, and repeated use. You develop a habit. You do it over and over again. Neurons that fire together, wire together. So I'm going to ask you, participate in a bit of research here. And if you do not wish to participate, you are excused. But what we're going to do is we're going to do a 60-second laughter meditation. Normally, with audiences, I do this for 2 minutes. We've got a short amount of time, and we're at a higher altitude. I think I might keel over if I do this for 2 minutes. We're going to start out with laughter for no reason. And most likely, for the majority of you, it will become true spontaneous laughter. Again, if you don't want to participate or you start feeling tired or lightheaded, stop. But otherwise, I would like for you to try to do it for the 60 seconds, and then we'll come back and discuss our findings and our research here. So, Heidi, you're going to time us for 60 seconds. Tell us when to start. Go? Or no? Oh, yeah, real funny. Oh, I feel like when Harry met Sally, I'll have what she's having. Heidi, I want you to give us a 6-second count. I want you to check your pulse. Ready? Begin. Okay, mark your pulse now where it is compared to where it was before. Let's do one more 6-second, and we're going to count respirations while we got Heidi here. Ready? Okay, will you give us another 6 seconds? Okay, respirations. Okay, mark your respirations compared to where they were before. And then just do a self-assessment. Where is your mood now compared to where it was when we first started? Where's your level of alertness? And where's your level of comfort? This is just a little self-assessment for you. I'd love to hear what your findings are later, afterwards. I'm going to be at the table in the next room. But just the beginning of showing people, because so many times I can show people what the research is, and oh gosh, when I have groups that have doctors in the audience, they love to see the research. So I'm in an effort to make you happy, our friend Lee Burke, Heidi and I are great friends with probably the leading psychoneuroimmunologist in the world, and he said if we took what we know now about laughter and bottled it, it would require FDA approval. So the next 2 slides are not really intended for you to read. If you want these on a PDF, just email me. My email address is Karyn@KarynBuxman.com. But you'll see here that we have study after study after study, studies that show an increase of longevity of life. We have studies that show an effect on the immune system. We have studies that show the effect on cholesterol. We have studies on the effect of blood glucose. We have studies on the effect of renin. We have studies on the effect of angiotensin. We have more studies in terms of expression of gene, blood pressure, the cardiovascular system, pain tolerance, the psychological well-being. There's all of these and more that the science is very new, but it's gaining momentum. And so what I'm really wanting you to understand is that this really, really is good for you, and I'm not necessarily wanting you to just wait for it to happen. I want you to make it happen by choice. Now, here's one of the issues. People will say, "Oh, but you don't understand. There's nothing funny happening in my life. There's nothing funny happening where I work." And if that is your belief, that's your truth. However, if you start assuming that humor is there, you will start to see it. You will be activating the reticular activating system, and you will start seeing things on a more conscious rather than non-conscious basis. It's more important about seeing funny than being funny. Some people are concerned, they're like, "Well, but I'm not funny." Great! You don't ever have to be funny. The whole point of this is to appreciate humor, and if you're in a position of leadership, to appreciate humor in others and help build that up, help them show their level. I have examples of things that I have seen around, or that Heidi has shared with me that we have seen around. These are just examples of humor in our environment. I love the fact that we have cameras on our phone now, because humor is abundant and everywhere. I'm just going to share with you a couple of things we've seen. I found this up in Maine. And I was getting my first lobster roll when I looked on the counter, and I realized that this blender is actually a fish bowl with a fish. Now, nurses love body fluids, death, and dismemberment, so I thought this was really hysterical. But haven't you ever felt like that? Like you're in a blender, and at any given moment, someone's going to push the button, and you are about to be fish food or chips. Heidi took this picture in San Diego, and this is an actual fitness. This is somebody who's riding an escalator up so that they can spend their hard-earned dollars on a Stairmaster. But again, it's the absurdity of things in our lives that provide us the humor. My coffee shop has unattended children will be given an espresso and a free puppy. A medical office that I toured this was their stress reduction kit. Bang head here. I don't even know what this means, but I thought it was pretty darn funny, so I took a picture of it. This I threw in because this is a 99-year-old mother of 3, grandmother of, I think, about 7, great-grandmother of about 27. She's holding up a letter that she got from the hospital letting her know that she's pregnant. So finding the humor around you. This last one, it's not that George Clooney is so funny. It was just more or less where he was. I was in for my annual exam with my GYN when I happened to look up on the ceiling, and there's George Clooney. I have to tell you, I didn't know whether to laugh or be totally creeped out. But the truth is that neurons that fire together wire together. The more you use humor, the easier it will become. Practice it, gain the physiological benefits. And remember, one of my favorite authors is Viktor Frankl. And Viktor Frankl said, how many of you do not know who Viktor Frankl is? He wrote a book called Man's Search for Meaning. If you've not read that, put that on your recommended reading list. And he was a prisoner of war during he was in a German concentration camp. And he said, between stimulus and response, there's a space. And in that space is our freedom and our power to choose our response. And in our response lies our growth and our happiness. Stimulus, response. Stimulus, response, stimulus. It might seem that it's just so short, but you do have a choice. There's many mechanisms that you can put in between the stimulus and response, but I'm hoping that next time you have that situation, that you will choose humor by choice and not let it happen by chance and experience the benefits. Yay, time's up. Thank you.